what are the metrics that we can use to gauge a comp team's effectiveness? Like, how do we gauge our own success as a compensation team? What do we need to go back to and say, is it, hey, we've got a 1.0 comp ratio overall. We're successful as a comp team aligning to market. I don't think that's one of the answers. But what other metrics have you guys found or seen that comp teams have made themselves or based their own success on?
I personally like the metric of total direct comp costs as a percent of your gross profit. So I think there's actually some tools out there that you can use to benchmark yourself against other companies who report their revenue and their profits, number of employees, as well as their total direct comp costs. But I think ultimately one of our big goals as an organization, any organization, is to try to be profitable. And compensation is always the largest cost. So are you helping the organization to be successful with the way that you are managing compensation, whether it's the guidelines that you're sharing with managers or advising people to stay within certain guidelines? And the reason why I say profit as well is because there's a lot of costs that can go into an organization's P&L, like rent and for buildings and office space. And those are a lot of the things that we get pulled into discussions on as comp professionals, as well as, what should our location strategy be? Should we keep this office open or close this office or whatever? And so I think all these different metrics can help you to see if you're being profitable as an organization and how comp fits into it.
If I could just flip your metric, Justin, it's same outcome, honestly, but it's positioning. So when we talk about comp as a cost, it's framed differently than as an investment. So I like to think of it more as what's the return on a total direct comp dollar. So it's just do the math the other way around. And then it positions it as, well, if we spent this, would we still see that kind of return or not? It's just a different way of framing the discussion. But ultimately, how productive is your comp spend is kind of what you're after. Like, is it respecting the economics of the business? And how is it changing relative to peers, whether, relative to your own benchmarks, et cetera? That also encourages the right behaviors about location sensitivity, around how many levels of different roles in a job architecture do you want to have, right? It leads to great business-oriented comp conversations when you think about that productivity.
Yeah. If you've made any kind...
Go ahead, Chad.
I was just going to say, if you've made any sort of statement to your employees as to what your pay philosophy is, not necessarily just competitiveness against market, but pay for performance or equity or any of those things, you have to have the metrics to back that up. And so that should be the compensation team's responsibility to make sure that we've put this philosophy out there. We've said this is what our intention is. We've gone through all of the different levels of approvals and everything else just to get this communicated out to the world. So we should demonstrate to some extent that we're actually holding ourselves accountable for that. So it comes down to probably however many different principles you've included as part of that philosophy, and having a core metric for each of those that you can kind of compare yourselves to. Sustainability, affordability, budget friendly, whatever you want to call it. It's one of those things that you could definitely tie into something like that, I think.
Yeah, I totally love that. There were two things that popped into my head really quick, and one is that some of the measures of your comp team success as a function are going to be qualitative in nature. We've talked a lot about kind of more quantitative hard metrics, but I think there are some more qualitative metrics you can track over time to understand how well does the business perceive that you are meeting the needs of the business. And I think that is an important aspect. And I think another one that I also saw someone comment on was, pay equity. How well are we paying fairly? Are we tracking that? And if it's important for us to pay, equal pay for equal work, and designing pay is our job, then we should be making good progress on having equal pay for equal work. We should be monitoring that.
Yeah, I love that, Clay. I think, as the qualitative aspect is, it is different than I think what a lot of times we look at. You can't put that necessarily in a spreadsheet easily, but if we kind of continue to think about, so much of compensation, the importance of it is kind of the perception of fairness and people understanding kind of how they are paid. So I do think one of the important metrics of kind of a comp team is, you can gauge this from employee sentiment interviews or kind of other employee interviews, but I think everyone on this panel has said at least once that how well employees understand why they're paid what they're paid and how the compensation practice works is a really effective metric to kind of measure one critical aspect of kind of the compensation team's function.